important for us as palliative care professionals as well. So, like always, thanks for turning on cameras. Makes me feel a lot better. Okay, so let's start with the case study. Okay, and I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to request that one of you, somebody who hasn't spoken much in these last few sessions, especially, if someone could volunteer to read out the first slide for me. So there it is, and okay, so here is the first slide. Is someone willing to just unmute and read this out? Anybody? Upashna, am I seeing your hand up?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Mr. A is suffering from advanced breast cancer. She is 50 years old. She is in discomfort almost all the time. She is from a middle class family. Husband works in a bank. He is away at work all day. And when he comes home, he drinks and is barely communicative. There is a history of violence in the family, which is now less need of Mr. A.'s illness.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
The Wolverson.
Please go on.
Okay.
Go on, please. That's the one. Anyone else?
The older son is about to get married. He is 25 years old. He wants to move out soon, but cannot proceed with his plans because of his mother's illness. The younger son is in college. He has been banned from his exam for non-attendance and is moving with a bad crowd.
Thank you. Thank you. Abha, did you want to say something? You have your hand up. You're on mute. You're on mute. We can't hear you, Abha. Can you unmute yourself?
Hello, good afternoon. No, I just raised my hand to read the para, but other colleagues have read.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
No,
all
it's
right.
okay. It's okay. Just fine. Yeah, we would like to listen to you more.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Thank you.
I admire you so much. And
thank you very much.
Thanks to all the team for such wonderful lectures. Yeah, please.
It's very sweet of you. Thank you. Okay, so here's a family that is clearly complicated, right? And we have someone who has advanced breast cancer. We have somebody who's got a drinking problem. We have people who are not being able to get on with their lives, and we have somebody who is obviously having trouble in his college. So you all had a chance to absorb this story. So let me just take a look at all your faces as well. What strikes you about this family the most? What's the first thing that comes up for you? Okay, anything. Who's the one who's coming into focus? What is your first thought? And it's okay if it's whatever the thought is, unfiltered. Don't give me your professional opinions. Don't try and tell me what the right thing to say is. As a human being, what is the first thing that strikes you about this family? You can
family atmosphere is so tense, husband coming back from work and just drinking, wife is ill, and the child indulging in bad company. So it's not a very harmonious atmosphere within the home.
Yeah, absolutely right. I can see chat box starting to fill up. Lack of a caregiver. Yeah. Husband substance use, pity and intense, no support, no support. So this family seems to be quite quite a lot of things are happening in this family, and it seems like there is no one person who can really anchor it, or there's no one person who's really performing the caregiving duties per se. Negative environment for the child. Okay, lonely, guilty. Okay, all right. So we get the gist of it, right? It's not a happy space. What are your emotions towards these four different people? Individually, what might come up for you as you are being introduced to each of these four? So let's start with the wife. What are you feeling about the wife? What is your human reaction to the lady with breast cancer? Yes, Geeta, please.
No support system from husband, son. She can't share her own feelings, what she's going through, her fear of her own future, and absolutely lack of support system. She has nobody to share her own depression or fear or anxiety, and absolutely no one to share it with.
All right. Yeah. So she seems to be quite alone. Yeah.
If I go on to the husband, I don't know whether alcoholism was before his wife's diagnosis or after, but it could have got on worse. Maybe he couldn't handle it, his wife's condition, and hides in his drinking. And the son has no role model, doesn't know how to cope with his mother's problem or diagnosis and father's alcoholism. So the best way he can vent is going out with that kind of a company because he doesn't know what else to do. Again, there's no role model for him. So, yeah.
I think maybe the brother could be a role model. Brother has a good job. He's going to get married. Older brother.
I will, well, perhaps, but let me bring you back a little bit. We're not going into trying to fix the family's problems. I'm asking you for your immediate emotional response to each of these four people. And it's okay to have negative emotions about any of them. Huh? I mean, this is not no marks for being a good therapist right at the moment. So anything else coming up for anyone else?
It looks like the family members are not able to cope up with the situation, and they're trying to handle in different ways instead of being a support to the person who is ailing from cancer.
Okay. Again, we're not, yes, you're right, but let's not get into the dynamics. Let's get into, I see this is a problem that I also have, which is it's very hard for me to get out of under my thinking hat and come back to a feeling state. So how am I
coming back to emotions, none of them have emotional support from either of them.
But what are you feeling about it?
I feel bad for the mother first, because probably as a woman, I relate to her. And
Okay.
I'm angry with the husband
Yes. Okay.
because excessive use of alcohol does lead to violence. And right now, she does not need that. And maybe he can't help himself, or he could, I don't know. But definitely anger towards him.
Okay.
And towards the son, I don't know about the elder son, I don't remember that part. But the younger son, again, I feel sorry for him. Okay. I don't feel empathy, but I feel pity. I feel genuinely sorry that he doesn't feel any support system, and it can't. So the best crowd that he can hang out is kind of a crowd he's hanging out with, where he's getting the support.
All
so
right.
Feeling is more of pity than empathy. Ideally, it should have been empathy, but I feel more sorry for him.
No,
Yeah.
it's all right.
I don't want to monopolize, so.
No, so this is good. Thank you for that. I like that you use the word I, and that's what I would like for other people to also respond from that space of how you are reacting to this situation. Okay. All right. So let's move on. Okay. So we've already answered that question. Now I'm going to ask you another question. What image does the word addiction bring to your mind? What image? What is that snapshot in your head that comes up?
Something you can't do without.
Sorry?
Something you cannot do without.
Okay.
Exactly.
In a nutshell.
Okay. And if I were to ask you to describe an image of somebody who's suffering from addiction, what would that image look like?
Not his original self.
Okay. Can you be more specific? Can you like, maybe you can, paint a picture for me. What would that photograph look like?
Self-absorbed, removed from reality,
Okay.
want to drown us in himself and his own sorrows. Others don't matter.
Okay.
So it's me, and myself. I will
Alright.
drink. I'll do what I want to do. I want to hammer my wife, hammer my kids. I'll do it. And that's his prerogative right now, but nobody can question because he himself not able to control
Okay.
and doesn't want to seek help. That's what I'm seeing.
No, that's good. That's fine. I mean, that's very, you've come from a very, very instinctive space. Anybody else? We're not just talking about alcoholism.
Maybe a bit vulnerable also
Okay.
in some sense.
Someone with vulnerabilities, someone looking unwell and alone. Thank you, Shruti. That's the kind of imagery I'm also looking at eliciting from everybody.
Risk-taking behaviors.
Like,
So risk,
specifically like,
maybe drunken driving, walking on the road when your motor controls are not in place,
do you have to be an
and
addict to have that?
also not being able to control himself. So a place where it's very guilty because you, even if you want to, you're not able to because you have a lot of withdrawal symptoms. And for you to function any bit of normal, you have to take the substance.
Okay. So again, so what does that look like? Shruti talked about somebody who looks unwell and maybe someone who's, how many of you live in and around, I remember a time when we used to come in by train to Delhi station, you'd see a lot of people sitting by the railway tracks, shooting up all kinds of things. And some of them were dressed for work. Some of them were dressed like they were going to an office to work. So it conjures different images for different people. For some people, it's lack of control. For some people, it is drunken driving, impulsive behaviors. For some people, it's homelessness, lying on the streets, filth, things like that, right? So I would say,
For some people, it might also be fun.
yeah,
So
for some people it might be fun. Yeah. So this could be quite a typical image of somebody who's using say heroin or one of those kind of drugs, injectable drugs. And these are not images that are pleasant to anybody, right? These are not images that we're comfortable looking at. Do these people look like they might have any addictions? Is it possible?
Possible,
possible.
very possible.
It is possible.
Yes.
All right. Let's use the chat box a little more, people. Okay. Now, let's go into this. I like my etymology a little bit. So, addiction is equal to dysfunctional dependence on a drug or a substance. And this interpretation of addiction being this is only 100 years old, believe it or not. This is not a word that was in our vocabulary in this particular context prior to 100 years ago. So let's go into the history a little. The root word is adiser, which has several interpretations chronologically through history. Adiser, adicure. One interpretation is to speak to. Another interpretation is to sanction, to allow. And then there's another interpretation, which is enslavement. And the Romans used the word addictus to describe a person who had defaulted on a debt. And because he hadn't paid his debt, he was made a slave to his creditor. And therefore, the modern interpretation of this became a slave. Okay, so that's just a little bit of etymology for you. There's also something called dependence syndrome. These are phrases that you might want to, if you're not already working in the field, and you might want to familiarize yourself with these phrases. Dependence syndrome, the definition as per ICD-10, which is the International Classification of Diseases, is a cluster of physiological, behavioral, and cognitive phenomena in which the use of a substance or a class of substances takes on a much higher priority for a given individual than other behaviors that once had greater value. So physiological, behavioral, and cognitive phenomena is how they've described it. And basically what they're saying is, like someone said, whatever it is that they're dependent on takes on a far bigger priority in their lives than everything else. Not just substances, also behaviors. Please remember, also behaviors. Okay. Now, a lot of people use these three words interchangeably. Dependence, addiction, and abuse. Please know that they're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. And the difference would be that a person can be dependent, but not addicted. Let's stop for a minute here. A person can be dependent on a substance or a drug and not addicted to it. Examples?
Social drinker. I may have a couple of pegs, but I don't have to have all day. I'm not addicted to it, but I would have a drink or two. I've known people who smoke weed during the weekends, but not every day. So
no,
not really addicted.
No. Well, that's one way of looking at it, Geeta. But the more accurate thing, I think, is also what Shruti just shared, which is that taking medication that you need to be able to function. So, for instance, how many people in this room
like to stay awake? Sometimes we like to drink coffee or strong tea. So that way we are dependent on that, but we are not addicted.
I have news for you. So anyway, the point is that you need certain drugs to function. How many of you take cholesterol medication? How many of you take diabetes medication?
I take cholesterol medication.
How many of you take medication for high BP or low BP or whatever, thyroid? Yeah. So you are dependent on the drug. Are you addicted to your diabetes pills? I don't think so. I don't think you're going to go break into someone's closet to try and get hold of those pills and take them in the middle of the night. Are you going to do that? No. But you are dependent. You are dependent on these medicines because they keep you at a certain level of well-being and health. That is dependence. It's not addiction. Okay? So are we clear about this? You can be dependent on a substance, but not addicted to it. Okay. So,
Madam, actually, could you redefine? I'm still confused. The dependent and addiction.
Dependent is something that I'll come once I get to the addiction part. It will get clearer. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can be dependent on something and not addicted. So I'm dependent on my high BP medication. I'm dependent on my insulin. I'm dependent on whatever else, but I am not addicted to it. Okay, which means that there are certain behaviors I'm going to describe to you, which will tell you the difference. A person who has developed tolerance to a drug need not be addicted. So very often, I remember when I was in college, when I was in school and I first started studying psychology, when it came to addiction, one of the hallmarks of addiction was that you would develop tolerance to a particular substance, or you had withdrawal when it was taken away from you. You can develop tolerance to drugs and not be addicted to it. There are certain kinds of medication that you need higher and higher doses of for it to have the same effect. Okay, that doesn't mean that you are addicted to it. It is just the pharmacokinetics of that medication that after a while the body develops a certain level of resistance, or it needs a little bit, it develops tolerance to a particular dose. So it's not necessary that that is an addiction. It is just a biological function. And this came as a shock to me later on, because the other hallmark of addiction, which I was taught when I was in school, which is withdrawal symptoms. Withdrawal symptoms don't indicate addiction, and they can be experienced with drugs that are not addictive. When I was about 21 years old, I worked in a children's ward of cancer hospital. There weren't too many safety guidelines in place, safeguards in place for us as interns, as staff members, and I got tuberculosis. And so for about 9 months, I was on tuberculosis medication. And these were very high doses, up to about 2,800 milligrams a day. And when I stopped my TB medication, it took me about a couple of weeks till I could pick up something without my hands shaking, because I had withdrawal symptoms from the medication I took for tuberculosis. So was I addicted to my tuberculosis medication? Certainly not. I couldn't wait to get it out of my system. But it did leave me with strong withdrawal symptoms because of the, maybe because we tapered it off in a particular way or whatever else it was. But so you can have withdrawal symptoms to something and not be addicted to it. It does not mean that you're addicted to the substance. Okay. Now, this is the difference between addiction and dependence. With dependence, you take a medication, you need it to function, but you're not addicted to it. So what is addiction? First of all, there are 4 aspects to addiction. One is compulsive engagement with a particular behavior and preoccupation with it. So, for example, if I'm an alcoholic, I'm thinking, where am I going to get my supply? I'm waiting for a particular time so that I can start drinking. I'm thinking of, like, if I'm going to, if I've been invited for dinner to somebody's house, I'm wondering if there's going to be alcohol served there. I'm going out somewhere else, I'm wondering, oh, is it a dry state? It's one of those thoughts that preoccupy me. Now, for a lot of people during the lockdown, it was very difficult because alcohol shops were shut. So it was really about where could they score the next bottle from. Similarly, so there is a compulsive engagement with this, and your plans become around that. Your behavior starts to modify itself towards that substance that you are addicted to, or that behavior that you're addicted to. I think Isha had pointed out, there's impaired control over the behavior. We know that maybe this is not good for us, but we cannot control our impulses, and we indulge in that behavior irrespective. Persistence or relapse despite evidence of harm. People who continue to smoke in spite of seeing those grotesque photographs on cigarette packets. There's enough and more information out there about the harm that tobacco can cause, smoking can cause, but I can't give it up. And I do give it up for a little bit of time, but then I relapse into it. Okay. And the 4th is intense craving. And if I don't get it, I'm really irritated. I'm really irritated if I can't do this particular behavior, if I can't do this particular activity. And let's also look at the fact that this is not just for substances. Children who are so addicted to their gadgets and their video games. You try taking that video game away from them, and what happens? What happens when you try to take away that gadget or that video game from them? You're going to have an almighty tantrum, or there's, grumpiness or whatever. So preoccupation, impaired control, persistence, and craving. Yes, Isha, you had your hand up.
But these mean the guidelines for dependence also. Dependence.
Yeah.
Impaired control. Yeah. So these 4 things are also there for alcohol dependence. Dependence, relapse after dependence, of course, like when you're when you're in the abstinent phase. But then these are also symptoms of dependence.
So the thing is, these are not three watertight compartments. Think of them as a continuum.
So could we say that addiction as such is a part of dependence?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of the continuum. So substance use, see, now we call it substance use disorder when we're talking about specifically addicted to a particular substance. Yeah, we call it substance use disorder. The lexicon keeps changing. Now in our circles, we don't say addiction, we say misuse. So it depends on the context. Now I might be alcohol dependent. I need alcohol to stay functional. Okay. Maybe there are people like that. They get tremors if they don't, so they're functional alcoholics. In fact, you know that they're given prescriptions, the medical use of alcohol. So that's to keep them functioning at a particular level. That is dependence. Now, yes, you can say that addiction and dependence have similar things happening, which is true. You're absolutely right. But dependence. So what I was trying to say earlier is, you can be dependent and not addicted. Okay, so I don't mean to confuse the issue too much, but this is the definition of addiction, where you have all four of these in your repertoire of behavior. Okay, anyway, I hope it clarifies a little bit more as we go along, Isha. If I'm not making sense 5 slides down the line, please stop me and then we'll discuss this a little bit more. Yeah. Okay, now here's where things get really interesting. Addiction is a complex condition with complex interactions between humans and the environment. One second, just hold on one moment. So addiction is a really, really complex condition with many interactions between humans and the environment. So just one moment, Sinya and Preeti, I'm just going to move my location. It'll just take me 30 seconds. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
No, actually, we lost for a while. We lost for a while. I mean, I lost for a while your voice. Everything.
No, I'd muted myself. I was just shifting location. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. Addiction is a complex condition with complex interactions between humans and the environment. Now, if you look at all those little boxes around in the circle, there's biological, there's chemical, there's neurological, there's psychological, medical, emotional, social, political, economic, and spiritual. How is addiction? Okay, we understand how it's biological, right? We understand how it's chemical, because there's a chemical dependence. The body gets accustomed to a certain kind of chemical that it needs. There is a neurological aspect to it. We're going to talk about the neurobiological framework in a bit. There's, of course, a psychological component. And because it does affect our bodies, there is a medical component. Emotional, of course. Social, because of the social fabric that we exist in. How addiction is viewed, how addiction is treated, how addiction is responded to. But how is addiction political or economic? What is an economic or political component to addiction?
Economic, because you spent a lot of money, and political. I might be wrong about political, but in movies and all, they show before voting, I don't know, a lot of people dancing and things like that. I might be wrong from the political point of view. And also political in the sense of political from the, like, cigarettes company have their own political thing going on, so that it's possible to manufacture them. Or other substances like alcohol. they have their own political thing going on, so that, alcohol making companies aware. But I might not cover things properly over here. It's a little out of my zone of expertise.
I think you're right. Harpreet?
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So according to me, the political is when the politicians don't stop these factories producing cigarettes in our country. That can be one of the reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is an agenda, right? That affects policy making as well. So yes, political, there is a
And gaining votes because we are like making the state dry, stuff like that.
Yeah.
When the state is declared a dry state, no alcohol, it's just because of politics.
Yeah. Politically motivated to right-wing or left-wing parties, people living near international borders, especially opioids, as we see in Punjab. Yes, I think it's great. Everybody's, so you are walking in the vicinity of this issue. So I'm gonna elaborate on it just a moment. I want to go back to one thing. There is a strong correlation between addiction and trauma. Okay. And even the most harmful addictions serve a vital adaptive function for dislocated individuals. When I say dislocated, I mean emotionally dislocated people. So this is from a book called The Globalization of Addiction. And I want you to bear this in mind, that addiction and trauma do have a strong correlation, but I also want you to bear in mind that that's not everybody who has an addiction has been traumatized. Some people are addicted because they got into it for recreational purposes. People take drugs to party, people they drink because of peer pressure and all of that, and then they get addicted. So it's not necessary that everybody who has an addiction has a trauma, a correlation, but there is a strong correlation with regard to trauma in terms of who is more predisposed to getting addicted. Now I'm going to try and elaborate. We did cover adverse childhood events in mental health session, did we not? Do you remember that we did that? Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to very quickly touch upon it again. Remember adverse childhood events, ACEs. There are 3 types of ACEs: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. And under abuse, you have physical, emotional, sexual. Under neglect, you have physical neglect, children not being cuddled, children not being given physical attention and love and nurture when they're small and as they grow up. And there's emotional neglect, where maybe all their physical needs are met, but there is no emotional need that is met, or there's not enough affection being, shown to the child. And of course, there's household dysfunction, like there could be mental illness in the household. And by mental illness, it could be something very subtle. It could be somebody who just has a subtle but manipulative sort of mental illness. There could be somebody who's committed a crime. There's mother treated violently. Other people who have substance abuse in the family. There could be divorce. Any number of household dysfunctions. It's not limited to what I've just put on the screen. And the study shows us that the more number of adverse childhood events a person is experiencing, the more likelihood of later issues in life, and that those issues can be in terms of behavior as well as physical and mental health. So the more the number of ACEs, the more the likelihood of behavioral dysfunction or mental and physical health suffering. Okay, and you will remember this slide where adverse childhood events or experiences come here. It's number 3 from below. There's a lot of other stuff going on below that, okay, and beyond that. So historical trauma, generational embodiment. Historical trauma could be things like what we're seeing in places like Syria, in places like Ukraine, refugee crises. It could be a mass, like what happened at the partition in India, things like that. Those are historical traumas. And people, generations of people who've experienced that, typically also, if you look at it, because they've had to move out of their homes, they move to different countries, they move to other neighborhoods, etc. They find themselves suffering from social conditions that maybe other communities don't. Now, again, if you look at, for example, the African American community in the US, a lot of them live in the poorer sections of the city. Okay, the historical trauma for them was slavery. And you see that it has also translated into their social context. Children coming from these contexts also likely to have more adverse childhood experiences. We see this in India, we see this in various places. It's a universal phenomenon. Not to say that children who grow up in privileged backgrounds do not go through adverse childhood experiences. They have their own kind of childhood experiences that are adverse. They might have all the monetary or financial comforts of the world, but they have an absent parent. There could be violence and abuse in any household. And this results to disrupted neurodevelopment in the early growing stages of a child, and brain activity, cognitive activity, brain formation, prefrontal, your frontal cortex, all of those things. That's when the hardwiring is rapidly taking place. It's at this time in life, when the child is still developing neurologically, and the development is not just psychological. It's a biological thing. Your brain is forming neural pathways and synapses, and it's really evolving into this engine that's going to determine how you face the rest of your life. And if you have adverse childhood experiences, the physical development of your brain gets affected. Now, how can I give you an example of this? Okay, so as your synapses and neural pathways are forming, different parts of the brain communicate differently with one another. So I experience something traumatic, immediately one signal is fired to maybe my amygdala, and I have a certain kind of emotional response. My parasympathetic nervous system is activated, and so what that leads to is a rush of hormones. It leads to all kinds of things, and my body goes into fight and flight. So these are responses that we typically, those are the synapses and those neural pathways that I emerge. Now, if you compare neurobiological development to your body, how many of you work out? How many of you go to the gym? Hands up. Okay, walks, swimming, something? Yeah, all right. Come on, there must be more healthy people in this group of healthcare providers. It's a very disconcerting number of people that have put their hands up. Group, you only lift weights with your biceps. That's all you ever do. What's going to happen? Only that part is going to develop, right? And chances are that you get in, God forbid, you get in a fight, or like in a street fight, or you get mugged. You are more likely to use your arms in self-defense. You're not going to use your legs that you've never worked out in your life. I mean, you might, but this is your go-to because this is the strongest part of it. Yeah, some of you might be excellent runners and you might just run away from the problem, which is also a great way to handle it, I think, in certain situations. But what I'm trying to say is that you will rely on the part of your body that is strongest. Similarly, with neurobiological development, if only certain pathways are constantly used, that will become your go-to mechanism later in life. So we talked about proximal separation in mental health, where the child goes to the mother. The first time the mother cuddles the child goes to the mother. Second time the mother is dismissive of the child goes to the mother the third time, and the mother slaps the child and says, "Stop irritating me." This child never knows what to expect. And so even that is a certain pathway in the brain that will stay alert, saying, okay, be vigilant, just let's see what her mood is like. So it's that vigilance that comes in. Not every person is that vigilant. Children who've had safe upbringing and healthy attachment to their parents don't have that kind of constant anxiety where they're constantly canvassing the other person to say, okay, what is this person going to be like today? This kind of behavior also translates into other relationships in our lives, because that's what we've been trained to do. That's the part of our brain that's done all the heavy lifting with the weights. So neurobiological development has been impacted by the conditions under which the child has grown. I'm going to pause for just 30 seconds here. Has this made sense, or have do I need to explain this a little more? Is there anybody who has a question for me at this point? Because then I'll move on from here. Okay, all right. So I'm going to move on. Now, and once your neurobiological pathways are shaped like this, where you have a particular way of responding to something, it leads to a certain kind of impairment, because that's the only way you respond to stimuli. Adaptability takes a beating. You're not problem solving from a different perspective. There's more social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, and the likelihood of more high-risk behavior, impulse control issues, things like that, which of course, higher correlation with disease, disability, social problems, getting arrested, all of those things. And then it becomes a cycle. Those same adverse experiences are now repeating themselves in a different way. Okay. Now, several behaviors, apart from substance use, produce short-term rewards that may result in persistent behavior despite knowledge of adverse consequences. Okay. So what do I mean by this? I smoke a hit of ganja. I feel really calm. It's a good short-term reward because I'm not thinking of whatever was stressing me out earlier, and that reinforces my behavior. But what are some behaviors that might also result in short-term rewards?
Sexual activity, gaming, and internet use.
Yeah. And what is the short-term reward?
Pleasure in both.
And that pleasure comes from an endorphin hit. Yeah. So it could be exercise. You go for a run. You feel great well, I know we're supposed to feel great after a run. It's debatable for me. Sometimes I don't feel that great after a run, but the short-term reward of exercise is also an endorphin hit, or just feeling good about yourself that, hey, man, today I went to the gym and I managed to do this. So that also causes a short-term reward, and therefore I re-engage in it over and over again. I like the feeling I got when I did this, therefore I'm going to do it again. And neuroscientific data has led to the inclusion of non-substance behavioral addictions in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders. So this is just a little side fact. So addiction or behavioral addictions are also listed in the DSM, which is, for us therapists, it's supposed to be our Bible. I disagree with a lot of things in it. But non-substance behavioral addictions are also part of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Now, all addictions, whether they are addictions to a drug or to a non-drug behavior, please remember this, share the same brain circuits. So if you're somebody who likes to, who's on the internet a lot, who's scrolling through Instagram constantly or Facebook, the brain circuitry that is being used is no different from a heroin addict. It's a fact. It's the same brain circuitry. Okay. And the objective is really to create an alternate physiological state. And at the same time, please remember that it's not all biological. Okay. So I said it's complex, it's social, it's cognitive, it's emotional, it's political. So, but when we start thinking about circuitry, we sometimes think that, it's only about chemical imbalances or certain circuitry. No, I'm just giving you the biological background. So whether you are addicted to the internet or whether you're addicted to heroin, it's the same circuitry that is working. something is getting activated, you're getting an endorphin hit, you're getting an oxytocin hit, you're getting a dopamine hit, and therefore you're getting the pleasure. Okay. So suddenly we realize that that person struggling with addiction is not very different from us after all. Okay. Very quickly, I'm going to go through behavioral addiction. It is the intense desire to repeat some action that is pleasurable or perceived to improve well-being or capable of alleviating some personal distress, despite awareness that such an action may have negative consequences. Okay. Intense desire, so that's craving, persistence, repeating actions, perceived to improve well-being and alleviating personal distress. Okay. Behavioral addictions include pathological gambling. There's something called trichotillomania, like some people will pluck specific hairs on their body, on their face. Like, it's something that just becomes a natural thing for them to do. Some people like to set fires. They're constantly lighting stuff up. Okay. Kleptomania. At some point in our lives, we've experienced kleptomania. Somebody who's well-to-do, can afford to buy anything, will go into a grocery shop or a, or a Marks and Spencer's, and before leaving has to pick up something and put it in their bags. It's not like they're poor. It's not like they can't afford it, but it's this impulse that they have to pick up something or steal something. I once had a biology teacher who was a bit of a kleptomaniac, and she stole our stationery from our desks. So every time she'd walk down between tables, you could see all the students moving their pencils and pencil boxes to one side, because she would just do this very, very randomly. She would pick up erasers, pencils, and things like that. So, I mean, we laugh about it now, but, kleptomania is an impulse control issue. They just cannot stop themselves from doing it. Okay. Impulsive internet addiction or problematic internet use. That's basically all of us. And impulsive skin picking. Some people do that when they're stressed out, and it becomes a habit and becomes a self-soothing behavior. How many of you bite your nails? Any of you bite your nails or had a problem biting your nails growing up? I used to bite the skin around my nails as well. So that is also it's a behavioral addiction. Now, historically, they're also known as impulse control disorder. So you can say that it's lack of impulse control and a craving for that. Many researchers and clinicians also use the terms behavioral addiction, process addictions, impulsive compulsive behaviors. Okay, so don't get confused by all of this. It just means behavioral addictions that people indulge in. Okay, and this is really scary. Psychology today identifies internet gaming disorder. Most people now check their smartphones. This is a bit dated, this information. I got this information about 7-8 years ago or more. I would say that people now check their smartphones way more than 150 times a day. And young adults definitely send an average of 110 texts. But this study obviously came out before before WhatsApp University came into existence. And now all our good morning uncles and aunties, and I'm sure they're sending out messages way more than 110 times a day. So this is a problematic use of digital technology. Okay, and 46% of smartphone users say they cannot live, not love also, but cannot live without their devices, and which is a classic sign of addictive behavior. I can see some uneasy smiles on the screen. Okay, and just remember that these are not new disorders, just new targets for universal and age-old addiction processes. So what am I telling you? What am I telling you? We all have a problem. We all have a problem, okay? And this is where the compassion needs to start coming in. There is no difference between us and somebody who has problematic alcohol use. If you look at it from a very fundamental point of view, the wiring is the same. Okay. Yeah. TV watching, Netflix binging, shopping, and the biggest bane of my existence, because I thought I was safe. I used to live in a jungle very far from the city, so I thought at least I'm safe from this compulsive shopping. And then came along Amazon and online shopping, and they're like, no, we'll send the stuff to you. So online, how many of you actually, these targeted ads that come on your Facebook and your Instagram or whatever, and then yeah, and then you're like, oh, I'll just buy myself this small little thing, and boom, you're there. So these companies are relying on your addiction processes to be working for them. And so yes, it is political, it is social. Now there is a fair bit of controversy in diagnosing and treating or even naming some of these conditions, and some of these are daily rituals and instrumental to our survival. Yeah, eating is instrumental to our survival, but what about addictive eating of sugar? Sex and reproduction, but what happens when it becomes pathological? Working, oh my God, workaholics of the world unite. It is an addiction, because ultimately you're also doing something to get away from something else. It is giving you something, right? So, so all of these, it becomes very hard to say what is healthy, what is not. There are some addictions that society actually promotes. They reward you for it. And so then it gets a little bit, murky at that point. Now, please, impulse control disorders are not the same as OCD. Okay, obsessive compulsive disorder. They're two different things. There is no craving in obsessive compulsive disorders. I don't crave washing my hands 45 times a day. I'm doing it to reduce anxiety. I'm not doing it to get pleasure. So that's the difference. Impulse control it's a soothing thing. I mean, it's something that is giving me momentary hits of pleasure, whereas obsessive compulsive disorder is for me to reduce anxiety. I'm doing this because I believe that if I do this, then my anxiety will come down. Okay. Okay. Now, mere exposure to a substance or activity does not result in addiction. And this is important for us to remember. There is something else going on, that there are people who will try smoking pot and never try it again. And like I think Geeta said that there are people who will just do it on the weekends or in the company of certain friends. Okay. Whereas there are people who will try it and that's it. They're hooked. They're doing it all the time. What's this difference? Where does this come from? There has to be a pre-existing vulnerability that the person had. Okay. For me, suppose I'm just naming people whose names on my screen. So maybe Upashna and I were both exposed to the same thing. Upashna has no problem with it, but me, I need to now either smoke this or drink this every day in order for me to be okay. What is the pre-existing vulnerability that I had that made me more susceptible to this addiction? Now, addiction is a human problem that resides in people, not in the drugs or the drug's capacity to produce physical effects. This is a very controversial statement, in my opinion, because it's taking away the onus. Because yes, there are some things that are problematic in and of themselves. I wouldn't say heroin is not harmful, and it's the person taking the heroin who has the problem. So why I've put this study, why I put this in red here is because addiction is one of the most controversial areas also, where even people who are supposedly experts do not agree. Okay, I don't fully agree with the statement at all. And this is coming from a Harvard Medical School Division on Addictions. So we had a bit of a, earlier we had a conversation about dependence, addiction and stuff. So this is again, a very, very complex area, right? So where is the problem? Who does the problem lie with? Yeah, Isha, please go ahead.
Some substances produce withdrawal symptoms if you try it once. So even I don't agree with the statement.
Yeah, exactly.
And it produces withdrawal symptoms on everybody. So it's the substance that would be, but of course, this doesn't talk about all the substances, but some of them at least.
Yeah, please go on. Anything else? Anyone else has something to say about what I just shared? You might be wondering where I'm going with this, so let me just take you there. Okay. Now, there's this interesting story of when in the 1960s, where American soldiers who were serving in the Vietnam War, less than 1% of these soldiers were users of substances before the war. And during the war, they were encouraged to use heroin, barbiturates, and amphetamines to keep them going through the war. They were encouraged to use it. Soldiers were actually given a hit before they went into battle because it was believed that it would, either give them the energy or it would just wind them up enough so that they would go out and do what was necessary, which is go out and kill. 20% of these people met the criteria for addiction at that time: craving, intense need, etc., whatever. But after they came home, 95% of them got okay. So I want you to just remember this particular case scenario. Okay, this is just something that I'm going to come back to in a little while. So what is it about these 95% of soldiers who were addicted, supposedly addicted at the time? Why did they not need these drugs when they came back home? What makes them different from the others? It's the same difference between Upashna and I. If she and I have tried the same thing on the same day, and she doesn't need it ever again, and I need it every day. So now let's focus on substances. Okay, I'm not going to be talking about behavioral addictions now. I'm specifically going to go into substance use disorders. So why should we not use drugs, guys? What are the reasons why we should not use drugs? I know this sounds like an Archie. In Archie comics, they used to have this whole section on don't do drugs. So why not? My question to you today is why not? Let me get you started.
Harmful to health.
Bad for your health, okay? Does the
Your
society
functioning is impaired
function?
because you don't do your other work and you spend so much time trying to obtain the drug and then trying to use it. Then you have withdrawal symptoms following it. Then you need more and more to have the same effect. So you spend a lot of money, whole lot of things.
All right, okay. Talking to you while I drink my cup of coffee, which I cannot do without. Okay, so because people, no, and so when you ask society, when you ask people in society, it's wrong. People just shouldn't do drugs. People just should not do drugs. Changes neurochemistry and neural pathways is going to cost you your health in your pocket. Okay, fine. Because it's not natural. A lot of people say it's, it's abnormal behavior. It's abnormal behavior. It's not normal behavior. And it's certainly not natural. Because drugs will kill you. Whether it's kill you through poverty, impoverishment, homelessness, medical disease, whatever it is, they will kill you. So don't do it. So these are typically the answers we get when we say, why not do drugs? Okay, so why do people use drugs? If everybody knows all these harmful effects, why is it that people just continue to use drugs or substances? Why is it that people do that? Because in many places, it is a part of culture or a subculture. What do I mean by this? Don't we celebrate wine? And there are people who are wine connoisseurs. They'll tell you, oh, the top note is this, this note is this. Oh, this wine is a Shiraz. It's come from this part of France. So this has come from Australia. I mean, it's celebrated. Yeah. It's part of a subculture. You get together for a cup of coffee. You get together for, for a drink after work. Weekends, when you go out when you go out somewhere, many people, for them, going out and unwinding is about going and getting a glass of a mug of beer or, just unwinding with friends. So it is part of culture and people do it. Okay. And because to a lot of people, it is the drug that keeps the social group or social activity going. Yeah. It is a part of that. It's what brings us together. It improves performance in some people. And I'm talking about substances that are actually performance improvement drugs. There's always some controversy every year about some sportsmen being found doing, taking a drug to enhance their performance. For some of us, we might take it to keep us awake. Who said earlier that coffee, I need my cup of coffee to stay awake. I need my cup of coffee in the morning for my brain to kick start. And I'm very grumpy before that cup of coffee. I might be grumpy after 6 cups of coffee also. But the point is that I figured that I need that cup of coffee in the morning to get my brain to start working. Okay. For some people, I know it's also, it's the opposite also, it's to relax. Because it enhances positive and desirable feelings. There are some really mean posters out there at bars, like saying, so-and-so beer, helping awkward people find their soulmate since 1972 or something like that, because it somehow becomes this social lubricant in that sense. Okay. Because it prevents or diminishes negative or undesirable feelings. I escape my worries for the day by taking a particular substance. I'm taking the substance because otherwise I'm going to have withdrawals from the substance. So I don't want to go there. And I want to make sure that I'm functioning at that level constantly. Because it can satisfy curiosity. Some people are just curious and they want to know what it's like. So they go ahead and they try it out. Because it's fun, some people said, right? For some people, it's just pure fun. And this is how I go meet my friends, I drop a pill of ecstasy, or I snort a line of cocaine, and I'm having a great time, and I come home and I forget about it and until the next time. Okay, so there are many, 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 many reasons why people use drugs. You can add your own reasons to it at the bottom. Now, I want to just go into a little bit of, this is where I'm going to talk about political impact of drugs. Okay, indigenous cultures around the world partook of substances in ritual, food, and ceremony. Hi, Holi is around the corner. How many of you are going to have that glass of bhang? And it's been part of ritual, it's part of ceremony, it's part of celebration, it's part of food. Poppy seeds, khaskhas, we use it in our food, right? And ritual, ceremony. So indigenous cultures across the world, indigenous cultures, Native Americans, Indians, whoever, it has been part of ritual and ceremony. It was not necessarily an addiction. It had a very special place in our history, in our culture. The word drug that is used in the context of addiction is a word that appeared after colonization. Suddenly, the colonizers needed a way to control the masses. Why does the northeast of India have such a huge opium crisis, not opioid, opium crisis? It's because a lot of those tribes were also not easy to control tribes. And they were encouraged to smoke opium and calm them down a bit, okay? And if you look at overuse and pathological use of substances to then become called drugs, it is something that happened only after colonization took place in a lot of these countries, okay? The war on drugs rhetoric, I think it's pretty clear to you which side I am on now, but it's a heavily loaded statement and it impacts usually the most vulnerable sections of society. So this whole idea that we are waging this war on drugs and we want to eradicate drugs from every culture, please remember that it sounds all great, but what it really does is it really marginalizes people some more. And the people it marginalizes are the ones who are most vulnerable, like the poor, the minority communities, the colored communities, all of those people, the transgender community. And these are the people who ultimately bear the brunt of this so-called war on drugs. And there are 2 books that you see on the screen. I highly recommend these 2 books to anybody who's interested in the political history of drug policy reform. And The War on Drugs and the Global Color Line is a book that has a chapter also by Catherine Pettis, who is the International Association of Hospice and Palliative Care, our chief advocacy officer to Geneva. And the other book I really strongly recommend is Opium Inc. by Thomas Manuel. It's about the opium trade and East India Company, and it's a very well-written book, and it'll change your idea of Indian history in many, many ways. Okay, so this is why I say that addiction is a political issue, because it has been used as a political tool of control for many, many generations, and it still has the potential to be used as that. Okay. Now, patterns of drug use. Okay, I'll just stop sharing my screen for a second. I just want to come back. I want to let this whole political thing land with you a little bit. We all know that the war on drugs started around the 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, when America said that, oh, drug use is a huge problem in our country. This is a fact, and you can look it up. It was in Nixon's presidency when this came up. Why did it come up? It's because there were two threats to Nixon's, you know, power at the time. One was the anti-war left, the people who were the anti-war, anti-Vietnam War people back home in the United States. They thought that the war in Vietnam was a terrible thing, and you know, it needed to stop. The second threat to Nixon's government was the increasing Black civil rights movement. Now, these two threats to Nixon's power, how were they quelled? The anti-war left was associated with psychedelic drugs, and the Black civil rights movement was associated with street drugs. And then it became the war on drugs, because legally, you can't go after a bunch of people because they don't like you politically. So you go after something that is easier for everyone to accept as a good enough cause to go after them. We're not breaking up the Black civil rights movement. We're breaking up the street drugs. This is the origin of the war on drugs. And this is how it has spread. And how it has impacted India. Why am I giving you all this yarn? It has impacted India, which has impacted palliative care. So I'm going to get to that part now. And I'm going to skip through the next few slides very, very quickly, because I want to get to the main crux of it before we wind up. How do people take drugs, patterns and types? Abstinence. There are people who've never taken a non-prescribed drug or used to take drugs, but stopped and they never want to use it again. So abstinence means full stop. I've either never done it or I will never do it again. Okay, that's full abstinence. And this is what society pushes for. If you are a drug addict, if you have a dependence problem, the only real solution is for you to be completely abstaining from it. That is what your Alcoholics Anonymous program talks about. It's what a lot of your rehabilitation programs talk about. There are people who try it experimentally, try it out of curiosity with friends, maybe once or for a short period of time, do it a little bit in college, and then grow out of it. Recreational, people who just do it in specific circumstances with particular groups of friends at specific kinds of social events. Okay, so it's very, very recreational, and it is restricted to that. Instrumental, I take drugs to accomplish a task. This is performance enhancing drugs and so on, or I want to go to sleep, I'm taking a rest pill, things like that. Dependence, pattern of frequent heavy use. So here, Isha, I hope this is where the subtler difference also comes in. Frequent heavy use, usually for a long time, and results in diminished ability to control how, when, and where to use. And when a drug use stops, cravings are experienced and drug withdrawal symptoms occur. So in this context, it sounds like addiction, which is how they're describing it. Okay, so abstinence, experimental, recreation, instrumental, dependence. See that these are different contexts in which people would take substances and drugs. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but earlier the WHO Expert Committee on Drug Dependence used to say that there are only 3 categories: experimental, recreation, dependence. But an expert called Good in 2006, he said, no, it's legal instrumental. So something that is prescribed to treat or relieve. So it is legal and it is instrumental. It has a purpose. There's legal and recreational, things like tobacco, alcohol, caffeine. So all of these are legal and they are recreational. There's illegal and instrumental, like that's something that is not prescribed to you. You've acquired it through spurious means and you've taken it in order to enhance some ability of yours. And there is illegal recreational, which is basically, all your, now of course, marijuana is getting legalized in some places and things like that, but illegal recreational, taking it for fun and not supposed to be taking it, okay? Now, 3 factors need to coincide for substance use disorders to occur. A person who is susceptible, a drug with addictive potential, and stress. You might be a susceptible person and you come across an addictive potential, but if you have the right kind of help, if you have the right kind of support system, you're probably not going to get addicted. Add stress to that, and you're cooked. So what makes a person susceptible is a very natural question. We've talked about predisposition. We've talked about brain. Okay, so predisposition is I am predisposed to it because I've had adverse childhood experiences. My pathways are wired in a particular way, and I've also, that's what has been modeled for me. Okay, brain development in uterus, and there's a beautiful book by Gabor Mate called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, where there's a really poignant chapter called They Never Stood a Chance. So there are some people who in utero had some kind of development, brain development, which predisposes them to needing a particular substance. Okay, and I'm not going to get into it a lot because we'll just get lost in it. But in those cases, the child is born with that susceptibility. Okay, we've talked at length about brain development in childhood. And we've also talked about environmental and emotional influences, how a child is nurtured, how a child receives love and validation and so on. A neural circuitry of attachment, reward, endorphins and oxytocin. We've also talked about this. And regulation of emotion through neurobiological development. Again, neurobiological development where I'm not able to contain or control my emotions because I have not developed the skills. If I get upset, I'm going to throw a temper tantrum. I don't have the skill set to regulate internally my emotions and affect and patterns of attachment. So all of these things really go back to what we were talking about earlier, how a child is raised in its very few years will also determine the susceptibility of that child to addiction. Now, factors influencing the decision to use drugs and to continue to consume: availability, family and peer influences, environmental contexts, environmental factors, stressors, things like that. Drug-induced factors, where there are actually biological changes and you need this drug more and more in order to keep functioning. And there are genetic factors, traits such as response to drug use, personality, mental illness, and so on. Please know there is no such thing as the alcoholic or the addiction gene. There is no gene. There is no genetic sequence that you're born with. What the genetic factors that influence addiction are these: your body's response to drug use, your conditioning, and the probability of mental illness in the family, which predisposes you to substance use disorder. So I'm saying this very clearly right now. There is no such thing as the gene. It has everything to do with what happens around the development of the child. Okay. And routes for administration: people take drugs in all sorts of ways, through the mouth, through other orifices, and through the veins, injecting, and so on. Okay. Okay, I'm not going to get into this. We can share this with you later. Polydrug use: common motivations for using 2 or more substances at the same time is to enhance the effect of one drug with another, to offset adverse or unpleasant effects of one drug with another, to gradually replace another drug due to price and availability. And sometimes polydrug use can occur simply because a person has lost track of what they've taken. Okay, so you'll find a lot of the time, even the opioid crisis that you're seeing in the US, where thousands of people are dying, it is not only opioids that they're taking. They're also taking a lot of barbiturates and things like that. So they are being counted as opioid deaths because opioids are one of the many substances that people are taking, but a lot of the time, these people are also taking several other things. Okay. And polydrug use carries major risks because it can multiply adverse reactions, toxicity, overdose, death. And this is what I just talked about, that this is what is happening in the US at the moment. Okay. Recovering from problematic or dependent drug use. Why do I want to give up smoking? Why do I want to give up alcohol? Various reasons. Some want to just minimize the health risk. Okay. I want to just stop using one or all because I've realized that this is affecting me badly. It's making me dysfunctional. And I might need different ways to achieve these goals. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work for everybody. Suddenly stopping doesn't work for everybody. So in the case of more severe drug use, we have the concept of harm reduction. And harm reduction is really a beautiful concept, which sometimes feels a little counterintuitive. But harm reduction is that I'm not going to get you to stop all at once. I'm going to try and get you to reduce the harmful factors and outcomes one by one. I'll give you an example of this. I know a lot of you here are working in the HIV space. And so you must be quite familiar with harm reduction when it comes to syringe exchange options. So a lot of people who are IV drug users end up getting HIV because they're sharing needles. Now, harm reduction approach is, you're going to continue taking the drug. I'm not being able to stop you from doing that. What I can stop is you spreading HIV to other people by giving me your used needles, and I'll give you fresh ones. So the syringe exchange program. Okay. Now, a lot of people criticize that program, saying you're not stopping them, you're enabling them. They are not going to stop without specific help. But in the meanwhile, I am going to make sure that HIV is not spreading amongst this community. Okay. This was very nicely done by the Avahan program in India, if you read Ashok Alexander's book, this is something that they did do in the prevention of HIV. And it's one of the most successful programs globally. Okay, so that's what harm reduction is. In some countries like Canada and in the Netherlands, we have what are called consumption rooms. Consumption rooms are where you can come in with whatever drug you're taking and take it here, whether it's heroin, whether it's smack, whatever it is. And what I have here for you is a medical team on standby. I have food, shelter, water. And once you're done, if you overdose, there's a team that will take care of you. Once you're coming out of it, you have a place to clean up, freshen up, and so on. What this does is it gives them a safe space. And over a period of time, it's this connection that might help in reducing the amount of drug use. So consumption rooms are still, again, a hotly debated topic, but very, very high rate of reconnection and recovery. Okay. I'm very mindful of the time, so excuse me if I'm going through this very quickly. Counseling, of course, substitution therapy, like in the case of heroin, you have methadone for substitution use, and recovery management, because once you have kicked the habit, the management of that is also very, very important. Abstinent recovery is what everybody wants, that for people to just stop taking drugs all the time, but this doesn't have a very high success rate. And non-abstinent recovery is the use continues, but frequency and amount are reduced. And a lot of people respond better to non-abstinent recovery. And abstinence is not the only treatment outcome. Okay. Now, I'm going to skip this slide. I'm going to come to the palliative care part of it. Sorry. So why are we discussing addiction in a program about palliative care? Because how often are people denied pain relief because of a fear of addiction? I've heard this so many times. Morphine? No. Don't start her morphine. Not there yet. The pain, we'll manage the pain with paracetamol. And the person's pain is not managed at all. And I've heard doctors say we are not there yet. What is yet? Does a person have to be in excruciating, agonizing pain before they get pain relief? Okay. from a drug, by the way, which has been proven not to have a high rate of addiction. In immediate release oral morphine does not have it, but the fear of addiction prevents us from relieving somebody's pain. Do you have certain ideas about certain medicines? Families will sometimes say, or not families, the patient usually doesn't have a problem, but sometimes the medical fraternity has a problem or the relatives have a problem. Why is this person being given narcotics and opioids? There are people who will take CBD oil as an adjuvant pain therapy tool, but they'll talk about it in whispers because they don't want anyone to know. Okay. How significant is the experience of illness, trauma? How significant is the experience of illness, trauma inducing and a potential stressor? Illness is a huge stressor on the family. And a lot of people end up becoming substance users when they are caregivers for their patients or there is a sick person in the house. Because the stress in the house is that high. So remember that the younger son who went and started hanging out with a bad crowd? Probably the start of a substance use problem because of the tension at home. Remember, adverse childhood experiences. We talk about adverse childhood experiences. How about that household where suppose the father had a drinking problem way before and the domestic violence was also a problem. Those are childhood adverse experiences, right? Adverse childhood experiences. So we're seeing this youngest son heading down this path now. Okay. Are we missing an at-risk person in the family that is not the index patient? We're so focused on Mrs. A with the breast cancer that we're not seeing that her illness is causing a substance use problem in the son. And he's very likely going to develop behavioral issues. And finally, are we judging too harshly? Very often, you go on a home visit and get some case history on the family, and suddenly someone will say, yeah, but that in this case, the husband, he's a drunk. And we don't think of all the other parts of it, right? We think, oh, he's a drunk. We really trust him with the care of this person. Or we say, okay, the son, he's starting, to use marijuana or whatever. The immediate response in society is judgment. See, mother is sick, look at this fellow, he's just going out to have a nice time. So are we judging too harsh? And this is why we need to understand addiction, addictive behaviors, behavioral addictions in the context of palliative care, because you are going to come across these people. And you are going to come across high-risk people because illness is a very, very traumatic experience for people, no matter how well they cope. It is a trauma-inducing experience. Okay. And a lot of people have very mixed ideas about morphine and other opioids for pain relief. I'm sure not this crowd that much, but for me, I find that I have to really hard sell opioids as an effective gold standard for pain relief for cancer. And I cannot believe that in 2023, we're still doing that. Morphine, immediate release oral morphine, and now sustained release oral morphine, also great for respiratory illnesses like breathlessness, chronic breathlessness. And yet we find a lot of resistance from people saying, no, I don't want to take it. And what is it? Why? Because of the narrative. It's addictive. It's addictive. It's an opioid. And look what's happening in America. So what I'm trying to really do for you today is to separate out these issues. Please understand where these stories are coming from, whom these stories are coming from, and what we are depriving people of in giving into this narrative. Okay. So for example, opioids, withdrawal symptoms on discontinuation of opioids like morphine. If you do a sudden withdrawal, people might have low energy, sleepiness, disorientation, delirium, myoclonic jerky movements, which means sudden spasm, jerky movements, abdominal cramps, diarrhea, and this happens when you suddenly stop opioids. And in the use of opioids, we have some cardinal rules. Start low, go slow. We always start with a low dose and slowly build it up to a dose that the person needs for pain relief. And always one hand opioids, one hand laxatives, because opioids can cause constipation in a lot of people. So these are just some of the guardrails we use. And if you slowly withdraw opioids as the pain is controlled, you're not going to have these physical dependence problems. Okay, and addiction, as we know, very rare with oral morphine because you're taking it through the mouth, and it's not giving you a rush, like, you know, you're not suddenly introducing it into your bloodstream. So there's no rush, there's no euphoric, pleasurable rush that will make you reach for it for recreational purposes or for any other purposes. Okay. And how do we control addiction? We look out for craving for the substance. We look out for this person saying, "Oh, my pain is not controlled with this dose. Can you give?" I mean, of course, people will have the illness also might call for higher and higher doses, but we look out for behavioral changes. We look out for this person is not taking it 4 hourly. He's taking one dose in between at a time when maybe he doesn't really need to take that medication. So those are things we look out for, but by and large, our experience is that very, very rare with oral morphine. Okay. Now, I did talk about this right at the start of our introduction to palliative care. Globally, there is a dual responsibility. We have to prevent misuse, diversion, and illicit use of drugs and medication. But at the same time, we have to make opioids available for pain relief. And what is really happening is that today we have 37 million people with substance use disorder globally, but we have 61 million people in serious health-related suffering because they don't have access to essential medicines. But yet we talk about addiction, we talk about control, we talk about law enforcement. We are not talking about the almost double crisis of lack of access to essential medicines and pain relief. And this is something we all need to start opening our eyes to, okay? And and the funny thing is today that the people who are making all the rules are also the people who initially started the whole opioid crisis, the opium crisis. So you have colonial opium trade, which the East India Company built the empire on. It colonized country after country after country with this money that it made off selling drugs, literally. The East India Company was the biggest cartel in the world. And they made this money, and then they decided on the opium control treaties. As they decolonized, as they left the colonies, they didn't want to leave control with the drug growing countries. So suddenly they created these drug control laws because, hey, they didn't have access to the raw material. So why should the countries they leave behind? And of course, we saw a series of drug control treaties from 1961, 1972, 1988. And palliative care is a late arrival on the scene in the 21st century. And so we have a huge history to work with. We have huge things to undo, okay? And this is where we have to make the balance happen. And ideally, the prevention of diversion for illicit use should be balanced out with availability for medical and scientific purposes. But this is what it looks like till today. We are more worried about addiction and the possibility of addiction. We're not worried about lack of pain relief. So what we really need to do is, there are two sides to this debate. Let's control, let's control, let's control. And some of us are saying, give safe access, give safe access. And historically, these two have been seen as sitting on opposite sides of the table, where the value is, no, it's harmful, so stop. And we're saying, no, it's valuable for pain relief, so please make it happen. But how do we achieve balance is by really looking at, from the patient's point of view, whether the person has substance use disorder or whether the person has cancer. And focus on the suffering of the individual and their families, rather than on this larger debate that is going on. I mean, of course, that is important, but how are we helping the person? Is this person in pain and in need of pain relief and not getting it? Then that's what we need to enable for that person. We need to focus on safe access to high quality data on opioid use, which we are doing. We're generating, even today, a lot of the literature is only coming out of the West. So in countries like India, we really need to build this case more strongly. And we really need to focus on partnership between governments, organizations, like some of you are from, and professionals like medical people. I'm mindful of the time that we're over time already, but very quickly here, back in 2001, There was a study done in Kerala that on 1,723 patients using morphine, there was a good system of documentation. Where was the prescription? Who was given it? What is the address of that patient? So on. And no major unaccounted discrepancies. Over 2 years, we didn't find anybody misusing it. And when we investigated slight minor discrepancies, like, it was not entered properly in the book, we found that actually it was just a clerical error. It was not that somebody was trying to siphon it off. This is really important because it demonstrates that this can be done safely. Okay. And we have successfully implemented these very rational rules since 1998. There are over 170 recognized medical institutions in Kerala that dispense oral morphine for people to use in their homes. And injectable morphine and other opioids are reserved for hospitals because that has a likelihood of dependence. And till today, in the last 23 years, 24 years, we have never seen one single case of diversion. And this is very, very important for us to know because this is the argument we use in other parts of the country. Okay. And finally, I'm just going to say, I'm going to stop with this. Dr. Henry, this character who appears in Gabor Mate's book, he says this: if mental health is the poor sister of the health system, then addiction is probably the second cousin who lives in the slums. We don't want to, it's a very murky area. People don't want to go there. There's a lot of judgment, but this is where we really need to become more compassionate. And rather than asking what someone is addicted to, when they got addicted, or for how long, he says, try asking them, what does it offer you? What do you like about it? What in the short term does it give you that you craved or liked so much? And universally, the answers we get are that it helped me escape emotional pain, it helped me deal with stress, it gave me peace of mind, it gives me a sense of control, it helped me connect with others. And what these answers really tell us is that it is neither a choice nor primarily a disease. It originates in a human being's desperate attempt to solve a problem of emotional pain, overwhelming stress of lost connections, of loss of control, and discomfort with themselves. Okay. And in short, it is a forlorn attempt to solve the problem of human pain. All drugs and all behaviors of addiction, substance dependence or not, whether to gambling, sex, or the internet, or to cocaine, either soothe pain or distract from it. So the question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. And I think that's a pretty powerful statement. So I hope that I haven't been too off the mark with all of you, but to me, palliative care is the relieving of serious health-related suffering and the prevention of suffering. And I think there is a group of people who have substance use disorders and other forms of addiction that become invisible because it's an uncomfortable place for us to go to. Addiction and palliative care are closely interlinked. One affects the other. There are millions and millions of people in the world who don't get access to pain relief because we don't understand addiction properly. So a little bit of a diversion from usual palliative care sessions, but I think in the larger scheme of things, addiction and palliative care need to be viewed side by side for these reasons. So I will stop. I'm 6 minutes over time. And if there are any questions, I'm sure people need to get off this call and leave. That's absolutely fine. You can write to me, and if you have any particular observations or questions. And but for those of you who can stay, maybe we can stick around for 3 to 5 minutes just to let this session land a little bit. Okay, I think we can close the session then. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Smriti ma'am. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you. Bye.